right. Welcome to the Quixotic Heights podcast, and this is where dreams take flight. I'm your host, Amy M. Lee, and today we're heading into the unknown, literally. Today's Quixote is Betsey Kulakowski, and she's the author of the Veritas Codex series, which is a thrilling mix of archaeology, cryptozoology, the paranormal, and it's been called the Indiana Jones meets X-Files, which I'm very excited about. Betsey's not just a novelist, she's a federally trained investigator. What does that mean? We will find out. She's also a recently safety professional retiree who brings a rare realism into her fiction. So we're going to be talking about everything from Bigfoot to beliefs to her real life inspirations and what it takes to be an amazing, suspenseful, smart fiction mystery writer and everything in between. So buckle up. We're going to go on this wild ride through the world of the unexplained. So Betsey, tell us more about yourself and your defining quixotic moment. What was your big crazy dream?
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. It's always nice to sit down and visit with you. My crazy dream started when I was about 6 years old. I wanted to write books. I wanted to tell stories. My grandfather was a fantastic storyteller. So at 6, I wrote my first book, cardboard cutout, cover, crayon illustrations, string binding, and I gave them out as Christmas presents. That was my first book. And I wish I had a copy of one of those somewhere. But I knew that at some point I was going to be a storyteller. But I also lived in a world where reality was really pressed into me. You can't make a living as an author. And I thought, well, that's really sad because we need more books. So I went on, had a very successful career as a safety professional, got my degree in emergency management, worked at some of the worst disaster sites in our country's history. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of write in the background. It was very cathartic for me to be able to sit down. If I'd had a bad day at work, something bad had happened, I'd gone on a disaster site or had to deal with an employer who didn't want to keep his workers safe, I would be able to sit down, write in the evening, just kind of get it all out of me and put it on paper. It wasn't always, I wasn't always writing about what had happened during the day, but whatever I was writing was fueled by that. And so I started writing and I haven't quit. I'm still writing.
So how many decades has it been since you were 6 years old?
Oh my gosh, do I have to date myself? My birthday's coming up. It's been in the double digits. How about that? It's been a long time. I'm in my 50s now, so I have been a storyteller for 50 years. So
That's amazing. That's
yeah.
amazing. So what challenges did you face along this way of fulfilling your dream of being a writer?
Right. So just, finding the time is always an issue when you have a career, you have a family. My 2 kids are now, I don't call myself an empty nester. I'm a bird launcher. I've got 2 birds I've launched from the nest, and they're on their way to their own, amazing lives. And so just finding the time was really the first thing. Honing my craft and really finding out how to be a writer, how to be an author, how to get published. I didn't really have a path to publication when I started writing the Veritas Codex series, which was about 2009. I had been watching, some paranormal show, and I thought, we're 6 seasons into this, and they never find anything. But what if they did, and it's a secret they can't tell? So I started writing this book, and it was really for practice. I wasn't going to show it to anybody. Nobody was ever going to read it. It was just for me. And I could be as outlandish and crazy as I wanted to be. So I just kept writing. And when the story was over, I thought, well, that was fun, but I think there's more. So I wrote another one. Again, just for practice. Nobody's ever going to see it. And then I wrote another one and another one and another one. And I started going to writers' conferences in 2016 to really learn the craft, learn the business of writing, because I really think that's what scared me more than anything was, to get a contract that wasn't, kind to the author or have somebody take advantage of my work. I mean, those were the things I was afraid of. When you write about Bigfoot, you worry that you won't be taken seriously or that you'll be seen as the crazy kid, because I was always interested in Bigfoot. So those were some of the obstacles that really kind of kept me from really fulfilling that dream. But once I got out of my own way and got past that fear, the world has opened up for me. And now I have 7 books out, more to come, new series getting ready to launch. So yeah, good things are happening.
Wow. Well, I think fact is stranger than fiction. And I think some of those
Mhm.
crazy stories that you have just might be true.
Yes,
Mhm.
I think
But
so too.
before we go there, tell me a little bit about maybe one or two lessons that you really learned about going from, your 6-year old self to today.
Oh gosh, there have been so many lessons. Over the last year, we had a family crisis in Arkansas. We lived in Oklahoma City. My mother-in-law took ill, my father-in-law passed away. She needed help. And my husband was at a point in his career where he was ready to step away and look for something else. So he had come over to help take care of his mom and approached me about July of last year and said, honey, I think I need to be here full time. And I know you love your career and know you love what you do, but if I could give you an opportunity to be a full-time writer, to make your dreams come true, would you take it?
No
And
brainer.
oh, well, actually, you'd think so, but I was really afraid because, what about income? What are we going to, where are the groceries going to come from? Food doesn't magically grow on trees in some places. And so it was just kind of a big thing. So it was another one of those times where I had to step out of that, let that fear out of the way and just kind of dive into it. And I had already been setting things into place so that someday when the opportunity was right, that writing career would become a business and not just a hobby. And so
Mhm.
I had already set up a budget. I had money put away. I'd hold money every time I got a travel check that would go in the book fund. If I sold some books, that went back to the book fund. Anytime I got a little extra something, it went to the book fund. And that was while putting one through college, helping another one get on her feet and get started. We ended up paying off our house, which is huge. And so those lessons that I had been learning over the years all came to fruition and gave me that opportunity to just step outside of where I had been and what I had been doing and reinvent myself. And having that courage to just completely become a new person, it was pretty scary, but I'm really liking where it's going.
Yeah. Well, we want you to keep going too, because that's
Yeah.
amazing. So I know you've won some awards.
Mhm.
We have an hour. You
Okay.
need
Let's hype it up because I could go probably an hour just on some of the awards that we've won. The first one was the Book Fest Award. So far, 6 of the 7 books have taken first place in the supernatural suspense category at the Book Fest. The only reason the 7th one hasn't won it yet is because it hasn't had its turn to be entered, and it's next.
What?
Book 7 last year at WriterCon, it was entered in the best published fiction category, and it won. And there was nobody more shocked than me. First of all, I don't remember entering it. I'm sure I did. But yeah, I was completely stunned because I had a non-published piece that had been also submitted, and it won as well. So yeah, that was really pretty exciting to be at a big writers conference with hundreds of people in attendance, and to have your 2 books recognized as the top winners in their category was just unfathomable to me. I just couldn't even imagine that moment. I had never once thought about what that would be like, and I'm a big believer in trying to visualize your goals and what things look like. And I never really realized how much that helped me until one day I found some notes at one of the writers' conferences where I had actually written out what my life would be like in 5 years. And it was, my son has graduated with his music degree. My daughter is on her own doing her thing. We have retired. I'm at my retirement party. And all the things that I had written down happened exactly 5 years after I wrote it down.
That's
The only thing I hadn't written down was the awards, but that was just a happy side effect.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Wow. Talk about Quixotic heights.
Exactly.
That is amazing. Okay, so let's take a little step back.
Mhm.
What drew you into writing thrillers, like especially the paranormal?
Oh my gosh. Here's the funny thing, Amy. When I started, I didn't know I was writing thrillers. I knew I was going to write a story about Bigfoot. My main character was a scientist. I wanted a strong female lead. I wanted all the fun things that I loved from the stories I heard growing up. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. We lived in Bellingham when I was very little, just north of Washington or Seattle, Washington. And I knew Bigfoot. Bigfoot was my first monster. And in the 70s and 80s, it was like the thing. You know, it was on every show. The $6 Million Man had Bigfoot on it. There were TV shows like In Search of, you know, Ripley's Believe It or Not. And so Bigfoot was always something I was really interested in. And that interest in the paranormal kind of expanded into things like ghosts and the Loch Ness Monster and the Bermuda Triangle and time travel and all these things that people think is kind of woo woo. It's just kind of off in the side, and it's really not mainstream. And you know, my dad is Mr. I don't want to see a movie unless it's a true story, and it better be pretty accurate, or I don't want to go. And I wanted to see the woo woo. I wanted to be as far from the truth as you could possibly get. And so I've always really kind of been drawn to that. And when I look at the movies that I like, I'm not one of these girls who sit and watch a chick flick. I want to see Mission Impossible. I want the car chases. I want the big explosions. I want, you know, weapons drawn. I'm a thriller girl. And as my reading taste matured and I realized that most of the books I was reading were thrillers, you know, it kind of shaped me into more of a thriller author. But I thought my books were science fiction because it was a scientist and it was fiction. So there really wasn't a category for paranormal thriller. And so I had been going to WriterCon, the annual conference in Oklahoma City, for many years. And in 2019, I had written in my notes, within the next year, I'm going to do one thing that is going to get me invited to be a speaker at WriterCon. I don't know what that is. I don't know what it looks like, but I was speaking at safety conferences. I like to do it. I'm a teacher by trade. You know, I kind of love training people on safety and emergency preparedness. And so that just seemed like the natural progression for me. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell the organizers. I didn't tell my publisher. I didn't tell anybody. At the time, I didn't even have a publisher. But that was also the year they announced that they were going to do the WriterCon cruise, which, you know, how could that be a bad thing? A week on a boat with like-minded authors, and you're workshopping your book. And I thought, I have to go. And I went to my husband. I said, look, if I'm really going to do this, if I'm going to be an author, you know, the way I want to do it, I think I need to be on this cruise. He's like, make it happen. So we signed up, and they say, okay, we have to send in a manuscript. And I'm like, oh, well, I had a bunch of them. I'd been writing for a long time. And, you know, I didn't really have any that I thought were any good because they were all for practice. But I thought, if I'm really serious about this, I've got to send in the one that scares me the most. So I sent in the one with Bigfoot.
Oh.
And we workshopped it on the boat. Of course, by now I've got 4 or 5 of them done. I know my characters. I know their motivations. I knew all the answers when I was asked. And I was open to making it better. Learned how to pitch to a publisher. I'm doing my pitch, and I'm sure my partner that I was trying to pitch to was thinking, this woman's not here, because there were dolphins outside the ship that you could see running alongside the boat. And I kept looking at the dolphins.
Instead of squirrels, they were dolphins.
I know, dolphins. Yeah. I'm not much of an ocean girl, but that had my attention. I thought it was really cool. I'm making sure they're not sharks because I'm phobic. But, you know, again, I got out of my way, let my fear out of its sight. And this was in February of 2020, which we know what happened right after that. Our cruise ship returned to Galveston the day they started locking down cruise ships in New Jersey. Oh. So we just got home, and I thought, well, that's it. Nobody's going to be publishing any books. Well, was I wrong? Yeah. Because it was a good year for books. And within a couple of weeks, I had an offer, not just for one book, but for the whole series, because I had pitched book 1, but we'd also gone to Chichen Itza on one of our excursions with the gentleman who would become my publisher. And the whole time I'm talking about, well, in book 2, Lauren does this, and in book 2, because it's all set at Chichen Itza. And finally, the tour guide says, you know more about this stuff than I do. Do you want to lead the tour? So maybe that's what sold it. But, you know, being willing to learn and grow and not think the book was perfect, because I knew it wasn't, was really something that helped me out a lot.
I love it. I love it. I mean, we're usually the ones that hold ourselves back, right? We're our
Right.
own
Hmm.
problems there. And the fact that I mean, it's great that you had a supportive, partner as
Yes.
well to encourage you and push you. But at the end of the day, you can be pushed and pulled all you want. It takes, you,
Yeah.
the
Yep.
individual,
Exactly.
to make that
Exactly.
move.
Yep.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So can you introduce the audience a little bit about the
Sure.
main character?
Right. So the Veritas Codex series follows the adventures of Dr. Lauren Grayson. She is a biological anthropologist and has a television show on cable. And she is afraid that her show is going to be canceled because they never find anything. And there's a lot of pressure from the network to really get that big discovery, that money shot. And she thinks she has it when they go down to Peru and they find a cave where this mummified thing is discovered. It's a headless chicken man, is the best description I could think of. Um, and she thinks she's got a shot with that, but the Peruvian government won't let her have it. And it just completely derails her. So she comes back and she's still looking for that big win. And they go on the hunt for Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest at Mount St. Helens. And I remember when the explosion happened at the volcano back in 1980. I was a kid, and that was kind of a big deal. So I kind of thought, well, that's a good setting for this, because not only do we have Bigfoot, but we also have the risk of the volcano acting up. So they're on the hunt for Bigfoot, and in the middle of the investigation, Lauren disappears. And all the evidence suggests that she was abducted by Bigfoot. But when she comes back 10 days later, she has no memory of what happened to her, where she's been. So was it aliens? Was it Bigfoot? Well, it's a pity she can't remember.
Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Wow. Okay, I gotta know, like, how does your dad feel about all this? Because he's more of it's got to be
Yeah.
realistic. So how do
Yeah.
you balance the scientific realism with, the supernatural elements of your work?
Right. Well, he's not one of my readers, but my mother
Mhm.
is. My mother loves my books. She was always my first reader growing up. She was always the one that encouraged me to keep writing and to be the storyteller that I was always meant to be. He's not so much into it, and that's okay. I know my books aren't for everybody, but at least he understands that this is something that I'm passionate about, and it allowed me to retire earlier than he did, which was always my goal in life, was to do something younger than my dad did it, because he retired when he was 56 and I beat him. So he appreciates that side of it, but it's my mom who's always been my first reader, my biggest fan.
Oh, I love it. You should pay her to be your beta reader.
Oh yeah, well, I don't even have to pay her. She's like, when's the next book coming? How soon
I
can I
like
have
that.
it?
I love it. You've already got a fangirl or a groupie.
Oh yeah, always have.
So what do you think is the hardest book to have written in your series?
Oh my gosh. Well, the first one I think honestly was the hardest, because you spend all the time getting to know your characters. And again, I didn't really expect anybody to see it. So, I the first time I wrote it, the first draft, the conflict wasn't very strong. The characters were just, pretty laissez-faire. But I joined a writers group, and the first meeting I went to was at the local library. There's about 6 people I didn't know, had never met. I'd seen them on Facebook, and they're like, well, come join the group. I'm like, okay. So I go to this meeting, and sit down, and they're like, okay, read your first chapter. And I'm like, what, me first? You want me to go first? I've never read any of this aloud, which is always like one of the first lessons you learn, is you learn to read your stuff out loud. So I read the first chapter aloud, and they were like, we really like this. It's compelling. I'm sucked in, but you need more tension here. And we would go through and rework scenes until, the arguments between Lauren and her main love interest, Rowan, were really tight, because I don't like to fight. I'm not an arguer, okay, whatever, but no, Lauren is hard nosed, and anybody that gets in her way, she's got a thing to say. So I really had to strengthen those characters and strengthen those relationships and those attributes of my character, that once I had that established, the rest of the books, I know her pretty well. I've known Lauren since 2009. Her phone number is in my phone. That's
She
how
probably
well.
talks to you in the middle of the night,
Yeah. Oh yeah. I just keep
inconvenient
waiting for her
time.
to call. Yeah. So just getting that first one down was really important. I have written lots of other books that haven't been published yet. Some have been harder than others, but really that first one, That was definitely the hardest.
Yeah, the debut is always typically the
Mhm.
hardest, and then you got to keep up with the, and make it as good as the first one, right? When you release your second one. But
Right.
do you feel like there was anything that really triggered your like, okay, I'm gonna do this? Like, was there any
Mhm.
defining moment?
Definitely that writing cruise.
Okay.
Just to step up to the plate and say, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I need to be. This is the right place for me. This is where I'm going to find all the answers. And if I take these lessons learned and I can put them to good use, then I can make this writing dream come true.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
All right. So, do you or have you had a paranormal experience yourself?
Oh my gosh, have I ever? This is where we're going to take our time,
Do
Amy.
tell, do tell.
Yes. So we're going to start. Let's start with Bigfoot. I've had 3 near misses with Bigfoot.
What?
3.
In Seattle?
Well, no, not all of them. The first one was at Mount St. Helens. We had gone up there in 2022 or 23. I can't remember what year. Because I have a friend that lives in Bellevue. I wanted to go visit her. I wanted to go to Mount St. Helens because I hadn't been there since I was a little kid. I wanted to see how I did. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? When I go back and make edits, I got a few things I'm going to fix. But for the most part, I got everything that I wanted to get right. Right. I blur the lines as much as I can, so it's okay. But we hike a lot. We spend a lot of time in the woods, and so we had decided we were going to do some hiking while we were up there, and we picked out a couple of trails, and we were hiking north of the dome of the volcano, and that whole day, my husband's looking at the birds and the trees and the view, and I'm looking at the ground for footprints. And I don't know that I ever took my eyes off the ground because I'm always looking for footprints. And I didn't find any. But the next day in the newspaper, there was an article about somebody finding footprints on the trail we hiked that day.
Oh,
So that's near miss number 1.
okay. Oof.
Darn it, missed it by that much. So
Yeah.
close. Well, the next one happened in Oklahoma. And for people who don't know this, there is a reported Bigfoot community that lives in the area around Honubby, which is far southeastern Oklahoma. I had a friend who I had met through Facebook who had books that are very similar to what I write. He's one of those people that I just immediately, we're going to be friends. And when he announced that he was having a book signing at the Bigfoot Museum in Honubby, actually in Tallahena, I decided I'm going. And I'm like, husband, let's go. And he's like, okay, it's a nice weekend. Let's take a road trip. We'll go down for the book signing and just have a day. So we did. And he said, I live just right outside of Honubby. He said, you need to drive down on this highway. It's the Bigfoot Highway. Stop, take pictures, just check it out. I think you'll be really interested in it. So we did. And it is a 2-lane highway with like no traffic. We pulled over, found a place to park, got out of the car, and my husband's taking some pictures of me under the sign. And I turned and looked at him and I'm like, do you smell that? And it was this awful smell.
Mm.
I have been in some pretty smelly places in my day as not as only as a paranormal investigator, but as a building inspector and safety professional. I've been to rendering plants. I've been to refineries. I've been to rendering plants. I've been to paper mills. And those are probably the 4 stinkiest places I can think of. I have been on crime scenes where there's been a murder. That's pretty stinky.
Mm.
This was 10 times worse than any of that. I was in New Orleans after Katrina, and it was 10 times stinkier than that.
Wow.
And it was just this kitty litter, rotting meat smell that is just hard to describe. And I'm like, I can't take this. Let's get out of here. So we got our pictures done, got back in the car, and I'm messaging him on my way home. I'm like, do you guys have a rendering plant anywhere near where you live? He goes, no. I'm like, paper mill? And I knew there wasn't one because I know where the paper mill is and it's an hour away. He's like, no. And I'm like, foundry? He goes, no. What did you smell? Tell me what you smelled. And I told him, and he goes, that was the booger. That's his name for Bigfoot.
Wow.
Okay, so I've smelled him. I missed footprints, and now I've smelled him. And then last year, we went on a girls' riding retreat to Blue Ridge, Georgia. And while we're leaving the airport in Atlanta, there's a drive up there past a little town called Ellijay, Georgia, where the Expedition Bigfoot Museum is located. And we knew it was there. We were going to stop, and we had called ahead and got in touch with them, and they connected us with a lady that they call her Amanda the Bigfoot Lady, and she's their social media coordinator and does all their events and things like that. She's a pretty cool chick. And so we got to go to the museum. We listened to recordings of the Bigfoot, vocalizations, and looked at the footprints and looked at all the science and research behind Bigfoot, not just the woo-woo stuff, which is fun, but you want the science, which is kind of Lauren's thing. She's all about the science. And while we were in Blue Ridge, we had planned a morning hike, and it was a little rainy that morning. They'd had storms come through the night before, and some of the trees had blown down. So there were guys out cutting trees up that had fallen over the hiking trail that we were on. And so we were talking to one of the gentlemen. He's like, well, have a good hike. How far are you going? He says, I'll kind of keep an eye out for you. And so we had left him just about the time his chainsaw fired up. We heard this blood-curdling scream across the valley, which was exactly like the recordings we had heard the day before at the museum. And we decided that Bigfoot did not like the chainsaw, because that is exactly what we heard. So I have smelled it, heard it, and missed it fronts by that much.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. So that's my Bigfoot experience. I've also done some ghost investigations, which, when you're a building inspector, you get to go into a bunch of old buildings when they're not open and go in places the public's not allowed to go. So I've been to a lot of different buildings that just left you feeling kind of off. There's something there. You can't quite put your finger on it. Fort Reno, just outside of Oklahoma City, was an old Indian fort, and it's still being used as an RDA research center. So it's still an active federal property, but they would do ghost hunts out there, and they did all kinds of historical events. And so my mom, being a genealogist, we kind of got in with them, doing some research for them on historical people that had lived there and some of the history behind some of the ghost sightings that they were having. And we kind of got in with a couple of the paranormal groups that would go out there. So when they had one of those events, we kind of got to the point where we'd heard all the stories and seen all the woo-woo stuff. We just wanted to kind of follow along and see if anything happened. And so they kind of let us be the de facto safety team, make sure nobody wandered off, got into a part of the building they weren't supposed to go to, or into a building they couldn't go into. And one of the things I would do is we would get there early, and I would go in and take pictures in the windows of the buildings that we're going to walk around. So I had a baseline. Again, the scientist in me coming out. And I had gone around an old Victorian, which had been an officer's home, and had taken pictures in all the windows. And my mother and I had an experience out there where one of the windows actually fell out and nearly hit us.
Oh.
And we're thinking now that somebody didn't want us there. And that was the only way they knew how to make us go away. But later that night, while we were walking through with the group, when I went to take pictures, I very clearly got pictures of a face in the window. He had his hand up, leaning in. You could see the outline of the eye sockets, the beard. And it was like, what are you kids doing on my yard? Kind of thing. Very clearly, I got some great pictures, which I eventually allowed the Travel Channel to use in an episode of Ghost Adventures.
Oh, wow.
So I've had some really good evidence. I've had other places I've been to where you see things out of the corner of your eye, or you hear things. I'm not so sure the house we're in now doesn't have some things going on to it, because occasionally I will hear things. I'm sitting in the living room watching TV and I hear something down the hall behind me. And it's a new house. So yeah, it's a new house for us. So I'm trying to chalk it up to, this is just a new place and you're not settled in yet. But I'm definitely paying attention because it's just really weird. One of the coolest things, though, was when I was an asbestos inspector for the state. I was working with a crew that was renovating the Skirvin Hotel, which is where WriterCon is being held this year. And I would get called anytime they had to breach containment. If they had to cut into the plastic to do something like turn on the water, turn off the water, they had to notify the state. So I would get frequent calls that they had to breach containment because the water kept coming on. They had it all sealed off with heavy duty plastic so that nothing could get out. But every time the water came on, they'd have to go and turn it off. Well, they'd have to breach containment to do it. And there was no way a human being could turn on the water with the containment intact, which I had to sign off on every time they reestablished their containment. So that was the first stories we started getting from them. And then they started telling me about power tools coming on when they weren't plugged in. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So we'll definitely be doing an investigation while we're at the Skirvin this year.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So one other thing is that I am incredibly storm sensitive. Being raised in Oklahoma, we have tornadoes all the time. Our house got hit by a tornado when I was 5 years old. I remember it very vividly. But the night before the May 3rd tornado, which was one of the largest tornadoes ever recorded, may still be the largest tornado ever recorded. I had a very distinct dream about what was going to happen that day. It was, I had season tickets for the hockey team right on the front row. I knew all the hockey players. I had a dream that one of the players skated over during warm-up and said, "Betsey, there's a big giant tornado coming and I don't know what to do." And I'm like, "Don't worry, we'll go downstairs. We'll have a little party until the storm's over with, and we'll come back up, play some hockey, win the championship, whatever." So I'm telling my mom and my friends about this before the game starts, and they're like, "Oh, you're freaking me out." And my mom's like, "Yeah, your grandma used to do stuff like this all the time. She was always right." And I pretty much predicted exactly what happened that night, except for the player skating over going, "There's a big giant tornado coming," because there's plexiglass, they can't really talk to you. But he looked at me as he left the ice going, "What do I do?" And I'm like, "I'll see you downstairs." And unfortunately there were fans that were on their way to the hockey game who didn't make it, and they didn't survive. And so I always wondered if there was any way I could be as accurate as the National Weather Service, if I could be of any good. But I know that I'm not that accurate. But I've had several of experiences like that. And one of them, I was doing a safety consultation at a business in South Oklahoma City. And there was talk about bad weather later in the week. So I was talking to them about their emergency action plan. Where are you guys going to take shelter? Like, it's a big metal building. Where do we go? And I'm like, "Well, let's look." So we kind of walked around and looked at what they had. And I said, "Okay, this isn't great, but if you had to make do with what you've got, here's what I would do." And we talked about where to take shelter. And I said, "And you need to communicate that with the employees." He goes, "Okay, we'll take care of that while we're walking through today." And so we did our walkthrough. And every employee we encountered, the boss would say, "Hey, we come up with this plan. Here's what we're going to do if there's a tornado. Here's where you go. I just want to make sure you know that in case we have to take shelter during the weather this week." That afternoon at 5:30, an EF2 tornado took out the front of that building.
Holy cow.
And nobody was hurt because they all knew where to go and what to do.
Wow.
Yeah. Was it
your
premonition?
Psychic?
Yeah.
Or
a little clear, is that
clairvoyant?
clairvoyant? Yeah. So yeah, really weird. It freaks me out when I do it, but my mom said my grandma did it all the time too.
Do you believe in past lives? Like you were?
I do, but I don't really have an insight into what mine might have been. I'd like to think it was something interesting, but I don't know. I had never had any kind of a past life regression. I think that would be interesting to do. It's on my paranormal bucket list. If anybody out there knows how to do that, let's talk.
Wow. That's fascinating. You've got stories and stories for days.
For sure.
So what's your writing routine like?
I'm still trying to establish a routine now that I'm mostly settled. We're still renovating the house here. We've been painting this week. I've got the carpet guy coming this afternoon. He may ring the doorbell here in a minute. But when I sit down to write, I am super efficient because I don't have time to waste. When I was writing and when I worked and I had to write, I would write in the evening after I got the kids fed down, when they were little. And I would write all night and all weekend. I'd take my iPad to the football game. I'm only there for the marching band anyway, so I'd write during the football game. I can write anywhere.
Wow.
Nowadays, yeah. Nowadays, I'm really more of an evening writer because I did that so long when I was working that noon, I'll finally sit down at the computer after I've had something to eat. I'll sit down, might have a meeting with one of my co-writers because I just finished co-writing a book with JB Kane, so that's coming out in July. Sit down and write for a couple of hours. I'm super efficient typist. I the last time I had a typing test. It was 145 words a minute. The program broke at 150 because I kept getting error messages. I don't know if I'm still fast like that, but I'm efficient. I'll just say that, because I don't think it's about the speed. It's about making the most of the time you have. And I have, in the last 30 days, finished 2 novellas. Now, one of them was co-written, so I only did half of it. But I also wrote my own novella in about 2 weeks. So I'm efficient.
I think I think you're a little serious about this writing.
A little bit. I have to make this work, because this is now bread and butter. I got to make it work. So I'm hoping now to get the publishing process expedited just a little bit faster too. And I think I got a path for that now. So
awesome. So how do you do your research for these books?
I do a lot of reading. I watch a lot of programs that are paranormal. I've gotten to know quite a few of the filmmakers who make some of these programs, and we chat quite a bit. I go to paranormal events and I listen to the stories people tell, and I'm always taking mental notes, because I'm going to circle back to that myth next. The one myth that I haven't gotten to write that I want to write about is the Loch Ness Monster. I've got a little bit in one of my books about it, but there's going to be a Loch Ness Monster book at some point. But just anywhere I can find the information, but just getting involved in the paranormal community has been such a blessing. I didn't realize when I was writing it that there was a whole community of people out there who were really interested in any of these subjects, all of these subjects, even if it's just one of the 3 subjects. And I got invited to be on podcasts, and I made more friends. And so now if I have a question about, what kind of equipment are you going to use on this ghost hunt, specifically what brand and what does it look like, describe it for me. I can message 3 or 4 people, get 3 or 4 different answers, and then take it and turn that into something that works in my book.
That's the power of networking. That's
exactly.
Amazing. Yeah. Have you been to the Conscious Life Expo?
That's not one I've been to, but I have been to quite a few different Paracons and Bigfoot conferences. There's one here in Arkansas coming up in October in Little Rock that I'm going to be attending, and I'm going to have a table. And yeah, I get to, I'm going to see a couple of the folks that I've met at other events that, Ken Gerhardt, you see him on all the Travel Channel shows. He's a biologist who works for the San Antonio Zoo. He works with the jaguars. And so we bonded over my second book being the Jaguar Queen. He sat down next to me one day and scrolled through his phone. Here's a jaguar. Here's a jaguar. You want to see this jaguar? And I mean, he had picture after picture of the jaguars. So I'll get to see him again. I'm really excited about that. Super nice guy, Bigfoot guy. Does a lot of stuff on Travel Channel, Discovery Channel. So yeah, really cool.
Okay. I want to put that on my bucket list to do one of those events, just to go.
And just come go with me. Yeah, it'd be
absolutely.
Fun. It'd be fun. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so let's talk about your fans. Tell me a little bit about their reaction. What are the really good ones and then the really bizarre ones?
Okay. I have so many fans who are just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he did that. Or, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. Did that really happen? Did this happen to you? I get a lot of really great feedback from my fans going, I'm so excited for this. I just wish Lauren would quit getting hurt. Which is true. When you get out and adventure, it comes with scars. So that does happen. But I'm listening to that. I'll take that to heart. But it may not happen, but I'll try. Probably the weirdest one I got was I had somebody tell me that something in one of my books was wrong. And I'm like, you realize I write fiction. I know exactly when I'm blurring the line because I've done my homework. I've done my research. I wrote a book about the Lost Templar. And it was completely fictionalized version of a Templar myth. And yes, I know that it's not conventional. It doesn't meet the Dan Brown level of Templar stories. But it's my book. It's my world, my universe. It's right where I'm at in my world. And, you can get on board with it or maybe go find another author to listen to.
Well, being an author myself, it just pains me when it's you're right. It's fictionalized your world. Yes. But then you get that 1-star review from that one reader and you're like, no, you missed the point.
Yes. That's what tells me that I have not found the right reader. When I have had 1-star reviews, but they never leave comments. So I don't know what it was that turned them off. I got a
Mm-hmm.
3-star review that's like, I love the story, but it's got one trope in it I just don't like. I'm like, well, what is it?
Yeah.
They didn't say
Yeah.
what the trope was. I'm like, I can't change. I'm probably not going to change it anyway, but I couldn't do anything about it unless you tell me about it. And
Yeah.
that's fine. Everybody has a right to be wrong.
Okay, let's talk about your future projects.
All right.
You mentioned that there's some stuff coming down the pike.
Yes.
So let's hear them.
So JB Kane and I have just finished the first novella in a new series that we're calling the Manifest Destiny series. And the book is called The Veil of Secrets. It comes out on July 7th. And if you know anything about me, I'm really big into numerology. So 7725, add that together is 7. So 777, 3 lucky numbers. That's why that's the release date we picked.
Okay.
But the book follows 2 sisters, Eliza and Esme Wren, who are descendants of Christopher Wren, who was the architect of St. Paul's Cathedral and had his own secret society. And now his legacy is their mission now to find these lost artifacts before an opposing force can use them for evil. And the opposing force is the Obsidian Order, and they work for the Aegis Covenant, or the Aegis Order in the Obsidian Covenant. Get it right here, Betsy. And they've got to find them before the Obsidian group gets a hold of them. So we'll get to follow their adventures as they find out who they are and what they have to do to be able to protect these relics so that they don't fall into the wrong hands.
So these are novellas that are series, serialized? Okay.
Yeah.
How does that work when you're co-writing with somebody? I mean, how do you maintain that same voice? Who does what?
Yeah, it's really funny. I'm really lucky that JB Kane and I have the same brain. We've already decided we're practically the same person, just in different form. It's when you find somebody like that, it's such a rare thing. But we met during we did a novella or a anthology called Autumn Tales, probably 3 or 4 years ago, and we met through that publisher in Missouri. And he had a podcast, and I was the first guest on his new podcast, and she was the second guest. And she actually said during her interview, I listened to Betsy's interview, and she and I are going to be friends. And really? It happened that way. So she was planning on coming to WriterCon or trying to decide if she should come. And she actually called me and said, I just want to pick somebody's brain. Is this really worth my time? Because she lives in Florida. And I said, look, I'm not going to try to sway you either way, but here's what I got out of it. And maybe that'll help you too. And so she came, and, we got to be really good friends after that. So it helps that we kind of share similar vision. Occasionally we'll get into some disputes about what should happen next, but we've always been able to find a way to work through it. But it's really simple. One of us writes a chapter, and then the other one writes a chapter, and then the next one writes a chapter, and we just kind of take turns doing it that way. And then we sit down and edit it together. She's an English teacher, retired, so she's got my editing eye for me. And that first book we wrote in 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks to the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of writers who obviously, that's their dream too. I don't know if it's their dream necessarily to make it a career,
right,
but it's definitely their dream to at least publish that one book that's been stories in their heart. What tips and advice do you have for them?
Just write every day. That's probably what I get asked this question a lot, is what advice do you give a new writer? The first thing I say is you got to write, and the words don't flow until you prime the well, and you have to prime the well by writing. So the first the first things you write, they don't have to be good, but they have to be written. So write every day. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because when you get out of your own way, magical things can happen. But you got to trust others and learn in the process. You got to take those lessons learned and use them to your own benefit. And I could probably sit here for 20 or 30 minutes with my list of here's what you should do and here's what you shouldn't do. But those are probably my top, 3 that I would give to a new writer.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I have 4 rapid fire questions for you.
Okay, I love those.
Okay. Cryptid you'd most like to prove real?
Bigfoot.
Favorite writing, snack, or drink?
Ooh, Diet Dr. Pepper.
Most inspiring author or book?
Diana gabbled on Outlander.
Okay, Bigfoot, aliens, or ghosts, who's most likely real?
Bigfoot.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. I love it. Well,
Yeah.
you smell them and you picture them and
Well, when your main character is a biological anthropologist, you know that if there is one, there has to be a breeding population of it to maintain genetic diversity. So, ghosts, I don't know anything about their genetic diversity, but I do know about primates. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm always going to go with Bigfoot when you ask me that question.
okay, great. Well, I'm originally from Seattle, so that's our
You
Bigfoot
know.
experience. Yeah, so we're big Bigfoot believers here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are there any topics that we didn't cover that you want to cover?
Did we talk about my podcast?
Oh no,
We
shame
need to
on
talk
me.
about it because you have been one of our guests on our podcast. It's
Yeah, this
called
is
the
your podcast.
Unfreaking Believable Podcast.
Yes.
And that is a partnership between JB Kane and Jenny LeBranch and myself. All of us are authors. We all write in a little bit different genres, but we came together through WriterCon and decided that we wanted to tell those unfreaking believable stories that made a difference in our guests' lives because of that one inciting incident, that one changing, defining moment, very similar to what you're doing here. So we are now in our second season, and we have had some amazing guests. We've had paranormal investigators, we've had TV show producers, we've had movie directors, we've had actresses that were in mainstream movies. We have had everyday people. We've had teachers and doctors and lawyers and just anybody who's got a terrific story that completely changed the trajectory of their life. We want to hear those stories and we want to tell them, and we want to be inspiring and encouraging. So we put out 2 episodes a month. On the 11th and the 27th of each month, we have a new episode. And right now we are in hiatus in our second season, but we're getting ready to start recording again for the rest of the year.
Wow, you're going into season 3 already.
Well, we're still season 2 technically. We'll be season
Yeah.
2 for this year, and then season 3 will be next year.
That's unfreaking believable.
Unfreaking believable.
Okay, where can listeners follow you, learn more about your work?
Absolutely. My website is www.betseykulakowski.com. I hope you can have show notes because that's a hard name to spell. I am very active on social media, especially on Instagram and Threads. I also have TikTok. I'm still trying to figure my way out on TikTok. I'm not super great at it, but I'm getting there. I have Facebook, but I find that I have more followers on Instagram, so I spend a little more time there. But that's where you can find me. I'm going to be speaking at a couple of events coming up later this year. I'll be at WriterCon, the Paranormal Conference in Little Rock in Arkansas in October. I'll be speaking at the Ozark Creative Writers Conference in October as well in Eureka Springs. And I'll be at the Between the Pages conference next month in Springfield. I'm not speaking, but I'll be there and have a book table. So just check me out, follow me on social media, and reach out.
That's fantastic. And then one last thing is, do you have any special offers, any book promos?
I do. The very first episode or the very first issue of the Veritas Codex is available for 99 cents in ebook. I also have a box set of the first 6 books in ebook form for $9.99, which is a bargain at half the price. And so if you want to get started with the Veritas Codex and you just want a sampling and you don't want to invest too much in it until you're hooked, check out the Veritas Codex for 99 cents on Amazon.
Yay. Thank you, Betsey.
You bet.
Well, that is a wrap on this episode of Quixotic Heights podcast. And I want to thank you, Betsey, very much for sharing your time, your stories, your insights into the world of the Veritas Codex. And folks, if you've enjoyed today's show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us, and check out the show notes too. And that way you can find out more about Betsey's books and follow her latest adventures. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning what you think you know. Thanks, everyone.